Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you back on the second lecture series of lighting, which is going to be done by Mr. Vikas Giri and Mr. Pranav, along with K-Light. What we had last time seen is Dr. Dugar and Mr. Basur had actually talked about urban scale projects. Today, the idea is that those were really starting points for all the projects which we look at such a very, very large scale. Today's presentation is largely based on the fact that having looked at such a large scale, what are the nuances of selection of light fittings and what are the small things which make a big difference in when you look at such a large projects. The idea is to look at a very small installation about saying how does the history of lights happen. Then of course everyone is now talking about LEDs. So what is the source, how is it happening, and what are the, well, like Vikas Bhai and we normally say, what are the probable mistakes which go on a site, and hence the kind of rectification processes which make it happen. Pranav Bhai is going to be talking about the history of lighting to a certain extent and what are the small elements which one should be very, very careful about selecting of the light fittings. Firstly, I would like to call upon Mr. Vikas Giri. Well, actually he's been my teacher also, so that is one of the greatest things which has happened. A commerce graduate, after completing his post-graduation in management, he entered into the electrical business in 1990 with switches. He expanded to decorative lighting in 1993 and then in 1994 onwards he's been working on landscape lighting systems. After understanding the nuances of what landscape is all about and the understanding about how complex lighting would be when it talks about plant material, he went on to further pursue a lighting course from AGI 31 New York in 2001 and 2 to understand the complexity of what goes into outdoor lighting systems. He has been visiting faculty for CEPT, I think about now over more than 2 decades. He has the pleasure of working with many reputed architects across the globe, and well, like he says, a small family strength of about 25 people in his organization. He takes each project at his stride and drives the passion to look at each one of them personally along with his own team. I would now like to call upon Mr. Vikas Giri, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. Actually, I've been practicing illumination engineering for more than 25 years. Have worked on lighting, installation, effects, gears, lamp sources. But when I was asked to put all this thing into a perspective, to put it together and share with you in 20 minutes or 30 minutes time, let me tell you, it was very, very difficult. It took me a lot of time to think, from where to start and how to share the information. However, today what I am going to talk on is 2 very important aspects for the lighting. One is lamp sources and second is in-ground installation for outdoor. When we talk of light, we normally see and perceive the last effect, and we are very excited about the last effect, that how our lighting solutions look like. But to achieve that solution and to ensure that it works for many years, there is big process which is there in between, which most of the time architects, I have experienced that they either are not very interested or they don't know probably. And my today's intent would be to share my information or my understanding about these 2 areas which are very, very important. So I will just take you to a small history, until 18th century, from the time the origin of the mankind, daylight and fire were the only source of lights. Then came the oil lamps, further went into gas lighting, and then in 19th century, electric light sources were invented. It started with thermal radiators and discharge lamps, and then from 1999 onwards, LEDs came into existence. Some information on the electromagnetic radiation, which is the visible light. from the cosmic radiation to the audio frequency, the visible light is only between this range. And it starts from 380 nanometers to 780 nanometers, which is a visible light. And that is all we are talking about today. Light sources, so it starts with thermal radiators, discharge lamp as two main categories, and we are all aware of there are incandescent lamps, halogen lamps, low voltage halogen lamps, which comes in the category of thermal lamps, thermal radiators. And discharge lamp, you have a low pressure which has got fluorescent, compact fluorescent, low pressure sodium. In high pressure, you have mercury lamps, metal halide lamps, and high pressure lamps. These lamps are now getting old and primitive. Probably they are not even in use now anymore because LEDs have taken over. I always feel that it is not by chance that 380 to 780 nanometer range, which basically forms a visible light, it is this very range that it is at our disposal from solar radiation to the earth. And that is how we are, from millions of years, we are attuned to one light called sun, and the perception of color that we are talking about is all attuned to continuous spectrum of the same bandwidth, which is the sunlight. Thermal radiators typically has got a filament, and the discharge lamp, unlike incandescent lamps, they don't produce any heating filament, but they excite some kind of a gases and metal vapors. That is how both lamps technology, they were working for almost more than 125 years. And now, because in this age we all face LED as a main source, and hence I would like to give you more information on the LED part. Evolution of LED as a lighting technology. So my agenda would be positive characteristics of LED, LED as a technology, LED quality criteria, LED in lighting application, and I would like to summarize this. This is very, very important that when we talk of LED, we in the market, we were discussing with Pranab also that everybody's experienced that you have a different range of products available, and from an X price to a Y price. However, when we are buying product, we don't know what we are buying and what are we paying for. And my intent and my effort today would be to give you some information on the LED part as a technology and the characteristics and the quality criteria. What to expect? So development process, understand that LED is a technology, what is binning, what makes LED special, what are LED quality criterias, and what are LED USPs in different lighting applications. So that is what we would expect from this. Evaluation, we all know that it started with the oil lamps in 10,000 BC, candle lamps came from Egypt, started from Egypt in 4000 BC, then bulb 1880, and then the LEDs came in 1999. Question is, what is LED? LEDs are nothing but optoelectronic devices. They are solid state devices and semiconductors. Unlike filament lamps, which has got filament inside, thermal lamps which have got a filament inside, or a discharge lamps which has got gas inside, LEDs don't have both. And it actually runs on a current. Positive characteristics of LEDs: extremely long life, high efficiency, white and colored light with good color rendering, and insensitive to vibrations. It has got no IR and it has got no UV. It is instant when it gets turned on. It is flicker free. It's very compact in design, and it has got no mercury content. So these are positive characteristics of LEDs for which it has become very popular. different kind of LEDs. We see many kind of LEDs, but just to give an idea, starts with stage, semiconductor, could be Dragon, could be Rebel, could be X-Lamp, XP, Oslon, Ostar, Fortimo. So there are many LEDs. When you buy a luminaire, you may not know, what LEDs a manufacturer has put inside, but there are various range of LEDs which are available, and this has got for various application. LEDs as a technology could be a single chip on board, could be a light engine, could be a light engine with the array of single chip, could be a light array with opal diffuser, could be a light array with white, green and red, and many more, I would say. Binning, very important term. Everybody knows about LEDs, but I would like to share my information on the binning part. Binning is nothing but a grading by color or color temperature and brightness. Extremely important criteria when you pay a price or you buy a product for an LED. What happens is, it is not possible for a manufacturer to manufacture each and every LED with the same characteristics. So it's not possible for a manufacturer to produce each LED, every LED with the same characteristics. So what they do is, normally they would grade each and every LED by color temperature and brightness, and this process is known as binning. You can see here that when you say binning, it is nothing but a receptacle which basically accept each LED by color temperature and by brightness. Okay, so coming back to, we know that binning is nothing but grading. Manufacturer would grade each and every LED by color temperature and by brightness. So the process basically, so each LED is, just imagine that there is a bin which is nothing but a receptacle box, and which is automatically segregating each and every LED depending on which color temperature, how close the color temperature is, and what is the brightness of that particular LED. You will observe that this luminaire has got significant deviation when you see each LED. So you will observe that when you buy an LED as a luminaire, you find that over a period of time there is some change in the color temperature or change in the brightness happens in the LED. That is because of the binning. And when you buy a good product, you have a very slight deviation, and you buy a very good product, there is hardly any deviation, and in case if there is a deviation, it is not even visible with the naked eye, and for this you pay a price. So most of the time we buy products which are always cheaper, but this is what the end result is. Color consistency. So you can see here that you put maybe 50 lamps or 100 lamps as an installation, and this is what you see with this slight change in the color temperature. Very usual characteristics in an LED installation. LED is a technology. So what makes LED special? In 1990, the LED came with white LEDs were invented, and it started with 18 lumen per watt, the efficiency of the luminaire, efficiency of the lamp. And by 2010, you can see it has already reached 150 lumen per watt. This parameter is nothing but the efficacy of a lamp, and by 2020, industry is actually targeting 250 lumen per watt package of an LED. Now vis-a-vis, if we try to see efficiency with other lamps, so there were fluorescent earlier available, sodium, metal halide, halogens. So halogen could deliver approximately around 30 lumen per watt. Metal halide could deliver, in the entire history of metal halide, could deliver somewhere in the region of around 125 to 130 lumen per watt. sodium could deliver somewhere around 140, fluorescent could deliver around 110, and LED has already crossed 150. So it is way ahead of the other sources, and it is expected to reach 250. So it will supersede, and probably all the earlier sources, they are not going to match this. And that is the reason that, I mean, this has actually gone out of the market, and LEDs will take over. Very important criteria about LED when we talk about binning part is color rendering. So we all know about color rendering, and you can see this and you can see this. So when you buy a good product with the right color rendering, your object looks very sharp and object looks very correct. Everybody buys LEDs, everybody knows about LEDs, but very important, I thought, the quality criteria. We should know that what we are buying. It's not that we are buying LEDs. So we should know that what should be the quality criteria: service life and temperature. Always keep these parameters in mind. Thermal management, luminous flux level, that means the output of the luminaire, color rendering, color temperature, LED, what technology they are using. So what is the lumen output? That means the efficiency of the luminaire and after the losses within the luminaire. So it is not about how efficient the LEDs could be efficient, but when they are placed in a luminaire, what you get deliver is something else. So one has to always keep in mind the efficiency of the luminaire and not efficiency of the lamp. What is the lifetime of a fixture? Very, very important here. What is the lifetime of fixture at 70% lumen output? So everybody says that LED, is meant to last for 100,000 hours, or 50,000 burning hours, or 30,000 burning hours. But very important to know that how much output you will get at 70% of the life cycle of an LED. And that is what we pay for. That is what we should know about it. Nobody talks about this very honestly in the market. What is the color rendering index? So when we buy LEDs, we always buy on what is the wattage, 15 watt ka de do, 20 watt ka de do, 10 watt ka de do, and so on. But LEDs is not only buying on wattage. What is the color rendering index? What type of heat management the luminaire have within the luminaire? I mean, because thermal management will define the life of the LEDs. What is the total connected load? So we say that, a product of a 30 watt, for example, if you see a 30 watt, is it actually consuming 30 watt? It is consuming more watt. So it's very important to know what is the total connected load. Now these are some quality criterias. If you go through these criterias, I'm sure you buy a good product, or you buy a right product, or you pay for a product the right price. Sorry. Some questions you should always ask while investing on an LED. What is the current? That means the driver, what is the current that driver is, the LED is capable of consuming. We were just discussing in the morning only that, we say that, okay, this LEDs drive on a current. So that means what manufacturer is doing is that, suppose there is a luminaire, assume there is a profile, and that profile, they'll say that, okay, I give you a 10 watt per meter profile. In the same profile, I can give you 20 watt, and the same profile, I can give you 30 watt. Very, very common, and then there's a very marginal cost differential between all the three sizes, three different currents. But it is very important to know that whether that particular LEDs are good enough to be driven on a higher current. So we should know about the driver current. We should know what kind of third-party testing certificate does the luminaire has. Is there any third-party certification, or it is just that somebody is talking, it's only by verbal communication? What is the technology for generating the light? So when you say LEDs has got different technologies, what we saw in the earlier slides. So what is the technology that they are adapted to generate the light? What is the glare control parameters? maximum guarantee period a manufacturer is offering. And what is the claim process? What is included and excluded in the guarantee? Because they're always in a fine prints. So very important to know when you invest on an LED, at least this much questions should come to your mind. LEDs in lighting application, of course, we all know could be in facade and architecture, could be for office, retail, could be for museums, hospitality, could be for industry, health and care, probably all of them. So LEDs have actually covered all of them. LED is, of course, the future of the light, and that is what I would like to summarize too about the lamp sources part. We talked about the positive characteristics of LED. LED is a technology, lighting LED for quality criteria, and lighting LED in lighting application. And LED is much more. LED is not this much; it's much more. But yes, when you invest on LEDs, when you plan to buy LEDs, it is not that you are buying a packet or you are not buying by a product. Actually, everything is written. I mean, it is actually getting a little mandatory. Nowadays, all good manufacturers are giving all this information on their packets also. You may not find this from the local vendors, but yes, many information are already getting now printed, and I'm sure in the future, in interest of the consumer, it will become mandatory for manufacturer to print those details and to understand it more correctly. What are we buying? What are we paying for? I would like to cover another topic, which is installation. Very, very important. And of course, I have taken one product right now is InGrounds. We all know what is InGround as a product, and every practicing architect would have come across one situation. You install an InGround fitting, and over a period of time, you say that no, it is not working. Or you may install 50 numbers and you say that within 1 year, 20 conked off. Very, very common. What we actually have to, what we feel in my understanding and in my experience, what we feel is we probably don't understand the installation process, one, or we don't follow it, number two. If that proper care is taken to do that proper installation, I am sure the product can last the way indoor light lasts. It can last, and then there is always a struggle between a vendor and company, your client saying that whose fault it is, and nobody wants to take blame. There's a very common thing. So you don't know where to point the fingers. But installation is a very critical thing. Even if you buy the best quality product across the globe, but if it is not installed correctly, it is not going to work. It is more critical, more harsh in the outdoor condition because the conditions are different. Conditions are little harsh also in outdoor. So I'm just giving you some information on some InGround application. Everybody has seen these images. Installation happening in a little soft soil. Trying to do this. Uplighting could be for a road surface. Floor wash. Could be grazing like this, could be facade, could be markers on those two images on your right. Couple of things I would like to share about is when you say InGround, and everybody has InGround, everybody has used InGround is a product in their projects, but I would like to share one more information is that InGround products application wise are available for, there are huge variety available in InGrounds, and one has to choose the right product for the right application. This is the first point. If you don't buy a right product for the right application, you may go wrong. So I'm just giving you some examples here. So luminaire with a very small dimension, installations can be done, by just drilling a hole and installation is done. If you want to do an in-ground installation which is flush mounted, now this has got a trim, it has got a flush mounted, then your installation is the method changes. Luminaire installation, with the round cutouts. So the fixing details changes here. Suppose there are many in-grounds which are walkovers, which are drive-overs. So the moment you say that luminaire installation, which has got a high pressure load, the installation is different. Installation, which is flush mounted, but if it is the same with a high pressure load, if it is trim mounted, the installation method changes. You cannot have same installation method for both the luminaire the moment it becomes flush or it becomes trim, even with a small change. Luminaire with a small dimension, which is illuminating the road surfaces. Okay, so, and there are many more. I would say there are more than 30 varieties. So luminaires installation with a high pressure load, which is for ground surface. This is for vertical illumination. All are in-ground luminaires. Okay, but all of them, I have just put 9 here, but I can show you another 30 or another 20 more, another 20 more, whereby every product will demand a different kind of fixing arrangements. So certain important installation recommendation, very, very important, which we always miss out in general. This is nothing but some kind of a connector, which is, there are two wires and those wires get connected with some kind of an connector, which are nothing but an IP connector. So when we use an IP connector, the electrical connection must be equal or greater than the IP rating of a luminaire. If you buy or use a connector whose IP rating is same or lesser than the luminaire rating, even this will fail. So this has to be higher than the IP rating of a luminaire. For an in-ground installation, typically you should have a gravel bed of 20 to 30 centimeters and check by pouring a water. See that water disappears in 30 minutes. If it is not, then again try to do the same thing again till it happens. Otherwise, if the water remains inside that box, it is going to invite problems. Ensure periodically that the luminaire, the top part is clean. This is periodical maintenance, but this is important that it is always clean. Never cover the visible part of the fittings for in-ground installation. Any part of the luminaire should not be in a direct contact with the soil. So when you have a luminaire, just imagine you have a luminaire, you are putting it in a soil or you're putting it in a concrete, but that luminaire should be free from each and every area. Otherwise, again, if it isn't touching the soil, it is touching the water, or it is touching any of, even the fertilizers, or certain chemicals, it is going to invite problems. Very important recommendation I would say is that when you install a in-ground luminaire, always keep it on, open the lid, keep it on for 30 minutes to 1 hour, and then use it as a permanent installation. I've been struggling with this, but now I'm getting a little better, which is use only flexible cable of the suitable diameter. Okay, do not use hard cables or armored cables. The moment you start using armored cables and you start doing termination, you invite problems. Use only supply cables with double case, which has got a sheathed wires, so with double case, and no single cables, no house guard wires, no two single cables to be used anytime. You use them and you invite problem. You buy a world-class product, you still invite problems. Small information I would like to share on installation and wiring. So imagine this is your drainage, this is a housing, the wire comes here, and you put concrete around, ensure your with a level adjuster that everything is right. Your housing should not be above the finished level or should not be lower. In case you don't have a facility to provide drainage, gravel, then you have to put a drainage pipe when you're using it in a concrete, so that the water has to go out. So with this, use the IP connectors, put the fitting into the housing, and we just have to like screw it to the last level. Always tighten it, always in a cross condition. Never, because most of the luminaire may have 4 screws to 8 screws. So always tight from in an opposite direction, and that's how you finally are ready for installation. I'm sure I tell you, I can very proudly say that there are many installations which I have done it 10 years ago, and they're still working. I'm talking about in ground. They're still working, and I don't think there is any special. There's no speciality about it. It's just that certain care to be taken, and the care is this much. If you take this care, I'm sure that the product keeps working, and you are ready to use as a product. Okay, so my information on LED lamps, lamp sources, including LED, and some installation. Some information I wanted to share with you on the installation part. I hope it is useful to you. When you start looking at it in your project. And in case if you have any questions, I am here to answer you. No.
Thank you, Mr. Giri. That binning was really a spinning thing. I can really say that it put all of us into a dizzy because of the software issue. Please accept our apologies for it. There are a couple of questions which we had when we were looking at this. So, how do you think the Ahmedabad market has changed till date since the time you started? At least looking at lighting. When I'm saying Ahmedabad market, I'm talking about end clients when they really call you and they ask you to actually give it a product display. How much that has changed since the time you started? Specifically for LEDs. I'm not getting into the starting points, but I'm just saying specifically for LEDs.
Yes, I have seen a great change. One is, I think, the great change is because exposure. Probably in last 10 years, most of the people, they started traveling abroad, they started looking into good installation, and they wanted, when they're back home, they wanted that kind of installation to happen. So acceptance of high-end product, good architectural product, I would say, and when I'm saying high-end means not necessarily high-priced value products. That has really gone many folds. So people have started actually using this kind of products, and they want those lighting effects, all these things they have started understanding. That phase is gone. So, and acceptance about buying a good quality product. The only point probably I would even in my topic that I chose was that even if you buy a good quality product, doesn't mean that that product has to last. So it is very important to know that you buy a good quality product, or even when I say good quality, not necessarily mean high price product. So when you buy a good quality product, it has to be installed right also. This is one area which I think that the acceptance have gone very high, but this area has got a lot of vacuum right now, because you still don't find good installers. I would say professional installation agencies who can install landscape lights in a right manner to check on this, if you check any landscape product which has been done 2 years ago and see the site conditions today, I'm talking about the lighting per se, and you will see that how many lights are not working or how many lights are working. And most of the time installation also becomes a very, very critical aspect here as well. But so yeah, in general the market has gone really very, very high on.
So when you say that these people have traveled abroad and looked at all the stuff, they are still talking about the visual content of the light.
Exactly.
Still only the look, feel per se of what they have seen, and not into the nitty-gritties of what you were mentioning.
Exactly.
So you still face the same problems when you actually go out to tell them that this is the product which we need to use, and the characteristics. So that fielding which you have to do is still the same like what was there.
Yeah, to an extent. But only thing is that we have been many years in the market, so probably customer listens to us little better I would say. But in general, yes.
Okay. You, I know for a fact, has been doing customized light design for a very, very long time. How does the manufacturing level fit in? Meaning my question is that I'm sure you must be getting it done through someone, and because you've traveled the globe and you really look at the light fitting per se, or what is internationally acceptable norms, we choose what is the light fitting per se, but then the fitting is only designed. It's more like a casing design. So how do you actually get the manufacturer for you to understand that quality of design?
When we started doing customization, we were actually forced to do customization. I'm talking about more than 25 years back, because what was experienced was that in a landscape there were typical very, very limited products available, and when we wanted to do good landscape lighting, there were there were hardly any catalogs available, there were no products available. So which actually we were forced to enter because of that, and that became our passion also. Now, when you want to manufacture or like when you want to customize a product locally, what is not possible is the engineering of the lighting. So what, to make it more simpler, our philosophy is that we always want to keep the heart, and we would like to keep that buy the heart from a good company and somewhere installed in the casing part, what we call is a cage, so that from the engineering side, we don't go wrong, and from the effect side and from the feature side, it becomes a good aesthetical appeal to a project.
Do you think you have ever encountered that your product is actually designed, or the case, or the overall upliftment of the product in such a manner that the companies have got to you saying we would want to take it up further?
Honestly, no, because somehow this whole facility of customization, we have never taken it to a very large extent. So we are keeping it to a very low profile. But yes, what has helped us in is when we are buying products, even indoor or whether outdoor, because we are doing customization at our end, when we're buying product, we see that product from a very different angle also, and that has really helped us to buy a right product also. So, but yes, company has never asked us because we never went to them also. It could be a reason.
Sure. Just if you were to give this lecture 20 years back, and when CFL was at its peak, so do you think that it's just a matter of time that the CFL is now kind of gone back and the LEDs come, and then within a span of around 30 years, 50 years, you think that there is something else in the world of technology and lighting which is happening, which you may have come across that very soon, or it may take certain time? I'm not saying very soon, because these light timings what we are talking about is 1880s, 1900s and 2000 and now 2020. Do you think is there something which is coming up which may over a period of time take on the LED, or just that the LED is being explored to a level where it reaches its saturation?
Yes, I think LED right now, I think it has got a long way to go, because by 2020 we are expecting the lighting levels to go, the efficiency has to go almost till 250 lumen per watt, and then what is next happening in LED only is the organic LEDs. So that one would see, just to give you an idea, you already come across televisions, which we call it as OLEDs, So those technologies already there in lighting field also. It's expensive, so we don't see it more often in the market. But yes, organic LED will replace, or I will not say replace, but that will add, which will further add as a source in the next 5 or 7 years to come.
Sure. One more last question. As architects, whenever we work in tandem, what happens is, do you actually, as a lighting consultant, okay, would you or do you actually get into the nitty-gritties of giving shop floor drawings along with architects to say that this is the right way, like you explained one of them right now, and like you said that this is one of them and there are 30 of them within the same parameters. Would you actually be giving shop floor drawings for every installation and the manner in which you do it as a lighting consultant, not as a vendor or a supplier? I'm talking about as a purely as a consultancy firm. So let's say if you were called as a consultant and said, these are the lights and this is what the landscape architect or the architect and interiors have given, would the drawings be coming from your office, or it would be coming from the architects or interior designers or landscape architects office and you would be vetting them?
Our office has never worked as a lighting consultant, so far. I mean, we have been always giving solutions to our customers. But yes, as a part of an exercise, we always want our site to get educated on this part. My experience is that, we have been giving them documents, we made them sign also that, this is what we have explained, and, you sign it so that we know that you are doing the same work the way it has been explained. But unfortunately, still doesn't happen. But yes, we have got people in our office. So what we started doing was that we said we will supervise them. So supervision was the only solution available, and we started supervising. Even if we give them documents, we explain them, but we have to supervise it. So that is one activity which is we have started doing. But yes, we think that eventually it is working.
One last very quick question. In landscape, when we talk about soft landscape, we still always find this huge vacuum about landscape contractors who actually understands the drawings of a landscape architect to a level where it can be executed without having to get into, like you said, supervision per se. Do you think there are schools in India which look at outdoor lighting installation as a course, or anything that's related to electrical as a course which really specializes in outdoors? Is there something like that?
I have not come across in India. Also, when we talk of, when we talk about lighting, so we always see the last result. That's what most of the time people would see, the last result. But there are so many processes in between. I mean, that is very, very important process, which is neglected, or which is not known, which is not shared, or whatever reasons. But yes, I'm not come across any school who does this. But it can be, it can be through a small workshop. It's always better to do a small workshop of 5-10 people. Further, getting
like what Mr. Basur was saying about China last time, where he started it as a one small step and then actually it's gone to a global level of lighting design.
Yes, yeah, because that's all about lighting design. Because so you may have a good lighting design, you may have a good product, but in between, part, if it is missing, then you don't enjoy the same effects, over a period of time.
That would be for me from my side. Thank you, Mr. Giri. Thank you. I think we will all break for lunch and then again we'll continue the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Back everyone. I will now request Mr. Jayant to come here, who represents Northern India head completely and looks at K-Light. They're going to give a small visual presentation about K-Light and then be available for questions if any. Mr. Jayant, please.
Thank you, sir. Firstly, I would like to thank Mr. Bobby for giving us the opportunity to be a part of this learning event on lighting. And we'd like to start with a small video that shows our journey of the company so far. Guess it's not a good day for electronics today. So yeah, so we've been invited here to put some points on behalf of manufacturers, that what manufacturers face in lighting industry. And Vikasji mentioned some very right points about how LED has come into the market and how it has changed the industry. Now, from an electrical industry, we have now transformed to more of an electronic industry. And it's been a game changer for everyone, be it manufacturers or consultants or designers or consumers. It has changed for everyone. Now, globally, we have seen that a lot of big players, a lot of well-established companies have exited from a lot of markets, and on a daily basis, a lot of new manufacturers are coming in. And speaking from an Indian manufacturer's perspective, it is very disheartening to see that despite having some ample of resources, some very qualified engineers, some very established designers, we still have to rely on China for a major of our lighting requirements. We had some big OEM factories in India, some very big established in India, who were earlier doing OEMs for global brands across the world. But now these factories have shut and most of these operations have moved on to China. Because of which, what we are seeing is that entire supply chain has been disrupted. And we had ancillary industries situated in areas like Muradabad, Aligarh, Meerut, who were giving good luminaires, are now just fighting for their survival. And it's very difficult for the handful of the manufacturers who are left in the India to make these products with whatever is left after most of it has moved to China in the last decade. Now, it's sad to see when we look at the statistics that most of our lighting industry is dominated by Chinese products. But slowly things are changing now. Government is bringing in policies which are more suited for manufacturing in India. It is promoting that, and slowly and steadily we are gaining the lost ground back. But still we have to take this long and effortful journey before we see some actual impact on the ground level. Now, talking about K-Lite as a company, it was started by an engineer 42 years ago. We had a very humble beginning with just 3 people, starting manufacturing of products in a room not bigger than 10 feet by 30 feet. But in 6 months from now, we'll be having one of the biggest manufacturing facility for outdoor decorative lighting products in the country, with an in-house NABL accredited lab before the end of this financial year. And the idea is to set the standards and follow those standards and have the labs who can actually test the products which are moving out of the factory. So over the years, we have constantly tried to empower and enhance lives of our people through these small and consistent steps. That's been our effort throughout the journey. And today we are very proud to share that we have not only been part of some of the major projects, some of the most important and prominent projects in the country, but at the same time now we are open to export markets as well. We are one of the very few Indian manufacturers who are now exporting on a regular basis to the countries like London, to the countries like UK, and we are also having an office in Dubai and London now. Now we'll be doing OEMs for a lot of global manufacturers, and at the same time we'll be exporting a lot of products with our brands. And it goes without saying that all of this has happened because of the support from architects and consultants throughout the country. And we always look forward to valuable feedback on how we can innovate better and move forward. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jain. Is there any other questions which you would like to ask specifically, or we can do it later, whatever is good for you guys? You have some questions, or you want to do it later? Later? Okay.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
May I now call upon Mr. Pranav. He is a management graduate and working for last 6 years in the field of lighting. He is an IALD associate. He founded his own firm in the year 2012, and in less than 3 years, he has been working almost on 20 commissions of various large scales, large and small, like he says, on both government and private fronts. His passion towards lighting and respective field is sincere, and thus the work is devotional, disciplined and significant. He has been recently, about a month back, that's what he said today morning right now when I asked him, has been recognized as the most emerging lighting designer by IALD, and is the first one from Gujarat, and has been invited to attend a conference in Barcelona in the first week of November. He strongly believes action make more fortunes than the cautions, which has been evident in almost all his projects, whether they are built or on the drawing boards at this point of time. May I please request all of you to put your hands together to invite Mr. Pranav, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the great introduction, Bobby Bhai, and I thank you for opportunity to kind of come in front of you all. I'll thank from my bottom of my heart to Isola and the whole team. Okay, I'll try and kind of I'll try two things together. That's what we are expert in anyway. When things go wrong on site, we are kind of troubleshooters and go on site. The clients think they think that we are installers, we are supervisors, we are magicians, and they want us to kind of have their landscape, their facade, everything right at all the time. Anything goes wrong, I got a call from a client. I just spoke to Bobby Bhai also. The project is finished about a year and a half ago. And I got a call from a client 3-4 days back saying that भैया landscape में driveway में light है ना वो चल नहीं रहा है. So I mean that sort of questions we answer, and obviously I share Vikas Bhai's view also that the market is growing, and while the market is growing, we are trying to kind of build this to the client also that this is how lighting works. And this is what lighting does, and that's what the first slide is all about. Lighting is something which makes or breaks the space. We try, and a lot of architects, a lot of clients, when we go for a meeting, they ask us, what do you do? When we tell them we are lighting consultants, they expect us to be contractors, they expect us to be installers, they expect a lot of things from us. And we tell them that we are lighting designers, and we try and bring what is desired from us in terms of evening, at night. We bring the space to life. I'm sure a lot of us come across a situation where what do you do comes as a question in front of you. A lot of times landscape architects also would face that kind of question, what do you do? And then to explain what do you do is a difficult job. Hopefully the clients understand too. But just moving on, I am also kind of taking on the slide. This slide talks about light and its journey, where it started from, and where we are and where we are looking forward to. Some 4 billion years ago, quite a long time back, that's when we realized there is sun, and that's where we realized that light comes through sun, and everything started brightening up. Fire 400,000 years ago, and then there we are where it says 2002, where OLED is something which is the latest in the market, which is coming to life. And a lot of people, they have started using a lot of LED screens nowadays. You see there are OLED TV screens. In terms of lighting, not many brands, they have started using OLEDs, but I'm sure with the pricing, with better pricing, a lot of local brands will also come into play with OLEDs. But that's the journey which obviously Vikas Bhai has taken us through also. So I'm not going to talk a lot about the journey. But sure I will. This is where the beginning of landscape lighting started. The public landscape, the gardens have been illuminated for as long as we can think of. Previously, it is done for beautification, it is done for security, circulation, and social occasions also. When we talk about wood candle, a lot of other lanterns, our body is used to yellow color, 2700 Kelvin, 3000 Kelvin, which is an ideal condition or a temperature color which we will obviously love, because our body has been used to that kind of color with lanterns, fire, for -100 years from now. So I would say -100 years from now, our body was used to only those colors, and that's what is in our genes also. So that's why when you see warmer colors, you get attracted to more warmer colors, sharper color. It calms you down, because our genes have seen that, and we are part of that. So last 100 years we've seen white color, intermediate, RGB, all these things, they have kind of emerged into last 100 years, but before that it was never. Now, the lighting designer, a word lighting designer or a lighting design, people started realizing it in around 1960s and 70s. The reason I've got William Lamb and Richard Kelly here is they, according to me, they are pioneers into lighting design. And when we talk about visual comfort, you see both the projects delivered by them, and you will not see a glare. You will want to see this space. You won't want to walk into this space. There is a museum here, which nowadays, we try and achieve this result here in the museum, which he had achieved back in 1970s. You see the sharpness of the luminaire here, the indirect lighting here, which would want or invite you to walk into this space, and it will serve the purpose of a museum or a metro station here. This is the part of design chain which ideally everybody would in our industry would like to follow, and we would love to do it. The center is where the architect is, interior designer, landscape architect, project manager, end user, lighting designer, and electrician. We walk hand in hand together. The reason I've got electrician here is we take electrician as a contractor also. That he is on site, he or she, they are on site contractors. Principles of controlling light. Reflection is something which comes to my mind first. Is the light falling onto a surface is fully or partially reflected depending on the reflecting coefficient of this surface. Now, when a light hits a surface, it is very important that like when I'm talking about the light which is hitting this surface here, the reflection of the light from this surface is going to be much more higher than the reflection from the gray surface here. It is the reflection of light from the color, from the texture, from the surface, and that's what you can see from the image here also. And I'm going to take forward few more steps which you should consider while controlling and selecting the lights. Transmission of light. Now, when you see this image here, you see the light which is transmitted from inside out, and you see a shadow, you see the image here. What it does is the light which is transmitted from a particular space, it creates a different magic. Whereas, I would give you a real example. If this light, artificial light, is turned off, and if the sunlight falls onto this space, it would create a different vision. Okay, now when I was talking about transmission, part of the, apart from transmission, there is something which is called light absorption. Well, where I mentioned about the surface. The surface, when you see a luminaire which is placed on the floor, and when you see the ceiling here, the concrete part eats up the lighting reflection. There is no reflection here. When you see on the ceiling, you will see hardly a little bit of light which is reflected back. And that's what I mean, the material. When we are doing a lighting installation or lighting design, when we are taking that process, when we are into designing process, that's when we ask questions to architects, to clients, to interior designers about material palette. And that is the reason why we ask those questions, because the lights reflect, the lights, the material absorb a lot of light. So for us to work out, a lot of questions are asked to the architects and to the stakeholders, so that we get what we have desired for, or what we are looking for in terms of a lighting design. Refraction is again a part of it. The image talks about the interference. Now, the effects are exploited when light falls on extremely thin layers that lead to specific frequency ranges, ranges being reflected and others being transmitted. Now, when the light source is, when you see the screen here, the transparency of the screen makes a huge difference when you put a luminaire in front or in the back of the screen. And that's what I mean here on this slide, is when you place a luminaire, you have to be very, very careful about the clarity part of the material also, how solid it is, how clear it is, how much light can it penetrate. I mean, when the light passes through that material, how much light is the spillage outside. Those points are to be kind of kept into consideration also, not just the luminaire part. So very, very important when we are hitting the landscape or the facade through a landscape. Very important is to read the material and read the palette of the material, and make sure, if you are not aware of it, then make sure that you find out more information about the material before you start selecting the luminaire for the facade or on the landscape. I think this is going to be the future, and this is what we are looking at and working on right now is glare. We are trying to cut the glare from the landscape, whereas we are trying to kind of project more on the object which we are trying to highlight, instead of, you know, the lighting fixtures being shown on the landscape. I'm sure a lot of the landscape architects and people like Vikas Bhai also agree with me that the future is glare free. We are working towards that, and everybody in the industry is working towards it, and we are also getting a lot of support from the stakeholders. There are two kinds of glares which I'm going to talk about. One is discomfort glare, and the second one is disability glare. Now I'll show you an example, and then can talk about it for a second or two. These are two kinds of glares, and these are reference images of that. When you see this glare here, I mean, it's on the street, it's a street light, but you cannot look at the street light, and it will make you blind. And that is something which I call disability glare. For a fraction of a second when you are driving, and if you look at this luminaire, it is going to kill your vision, and which is not safe. So we are looking to kind of reduce or take this off, and hopefully, you know, as stakeholders, we should also work towards it, where we reduce the disability glare from every single public space. How glare reduces and improves the lighting? That's an example here. Whereas, I mean, we are looking at the landscape here, where there is no glare at all. So if you are passing through a landscape, or if you are enjoying the landscape, the light source does not hit your eyes. It gives you a pleasant view. Distance and angle of light. It is very, very critical how and where we put the luminaire to lit a part of landscape or a facade we are looking at. The distance of luminaire makes a huge difference. When I'll show you from the image here also, the tree which is lit here, there is a green grass boundary around, and that's why we don't see the luminaire placement here. Purposely, the lighting is placed in such a way that it is hidden in the part of landscape, and it lights the tree, which is the intention. The angle at which the light strikes a surface. You need to kind of fix, or you need to kind of go on site and adjust the luminaire on site. It is not possible all the time to just place on drawings and expect the site to deliver what you have placed on drawings. And if you want to kind of place on drawing and make sure, then you have to put the degree angle of the fixture to be placed, and the surface level also to be put on the drawing for the site to deliver. This is what I spoke about. The white walls have reflectance. Relatively low levels of light can be used to light the walls and throw spiral trophy into the silhouettes. Now, when we talk about depth, we are talking about how we are dividing the landscape into three areas: foreground, midground, and background. Now, when we are trying to lit a landscape, once it's divided, we work on what sort of intensity you want to kind of lit the landscape into. Foreground, midground, and background, how you want to lit. Typically, the way I do it is here, whereas we work on an intensity at the furthest level where we create a depth. In the middle, we try and keep it very, very soft, and in the foreground, we keep it a bit more brighter than what it is in the midground. The reason we do that is that the brighter part creates the depth which is in the background. The midground creates a dark shadow which we want to kind of feel when we are doing a lighting design, and the forefront creates a kind of a screen. So there is a screen, then there is a dark patch, and then there is a background which is kind of quite bright. So it gives you the depth in the landscape also, wherever you are kind of lighting the part of the landscape. And this is the evidence of that. Whereas, you know, we've kind of created, we've lit this part here, whereas this is much more brighter. This is also brighter, this is also brighter. There is soft, and then we've kept it brighter, a bit more brighter here also. So, you know, there is some, we've left some space in the middle for people to enjoy the landscape instead of kind of lighting and flooding the whole area. Selection of luminaire is very, very important when we are selecting a luminaire to put in a landscape or a facade. When you see the column here, if the selection, when we are selecting the luminaire, we have to make sure that the diameter of the column, the front of the facade, where is the luminaire installed, what degree angle of product do you need, how many wattages do you need, what about the glare which is there on the luminaire when you are walking up. Imagine somebody is walking up the stairs here and they are going to hit this part here. You don't want the luminaire to hit their eyes and kind of, you know, make them kind of blind. You know, a lot of times when you're walking into a spaces, you walk down an alley and you find yourself, you know, you can't even look at the floor because there are fixtures, very, very bright fixtures on the floor. I know it looks beautiful on the facade, but, you know, it is not beautiful for somebody who is walking there. So very important is selection of luminaires, positioning of luminaire. When you have selected a right luminaire, you have to make sure that the position of the luminaire is also perfectly well. So when it is positioned right, that's when you see the results like this. Whereas you find uniformity and you see, and even when you see the spillage on the top here, you'll realize how controlled luminaire is this. And the installation, I don't see any problem in this installation. This is the space which I have clicked on my camera, and I could walk without any glare whatsoever. So it is a walkway, but and look at the landscape here. Now I'm not going to talk a lot about color of light because Vikas has taken a couple of slides and he spoke about colors of light and the wavelengths too. I'm just going to take briefly about the color Kelvin. Candle is, when we see a candle light, it is about 1900 Kelvin or little bit below 1900. So we talk about 1500 to 1900 Kelvin is the candle temperature. And going above from candle light, this is the temperature kind of variations. Nowadays, in residentials, this is a zone we work on. A lot of residences, landscape part, outdoor areas are working between 2000 and 3000 Kelvin. Inside the residences, we are working between 4 and 5000 Kelvins. A lot of public spaces, offices, office environment, public spaces, they are between. So that's the range in which, you know, the kind of projects changes, and obviously the luminaire color also changes. These are common languages we share between architects, engineers, and end users. We also kind of make sketches. We take the drawings from architects. We work on the sketches, drawings, renderings, and also do calculations to make sure that the luminaires which we've selected achieve the desired results. These are kind of renderings which are delivered to the clients. And this is how the calculations they come out. Obviously, you know, we go in depth to explain to the client if required, by the client saying that, you know, भाई आप समझाओ इसमें इसका मतलब क्या है कि ये रेड है, ये ब्लू है, ये क्या है. when we are asked those kind of questions, we go deep into it, but this is more for our understanding that we are achieving what we are supposed to do. Obviously technical drawings, whereas we share these drawings with architects and the site engineers and project managers for them to be able to understand and make arrangements on site for the installations of the luminaires to be procured in future and installed. That's the fact of life. In last presentation we spoke about lighting pollutions also, and I guess it was for 2 hours the lights in Los Angeles went off, and then they realized how many stars there are in the sky, and that's what I am kind of talking about here. Whereas we don't realize the inner city sky looks like this, but when we kind of go about 50 or 100 kilometers away from a city and go into a small town or village, and that's when we realize there are a lot of stars in the sky. It is purely a light and fuel pollution which makes our sky look like this. So when we start using kind of good quality luminaires and use fuel carefully, hopefully one day we'll start looking at this sky too. I'm just going to share a couple of images of before and after and what it can do in terms of landscape, the changes in the landscape. There's an image here, whereas it's the same building here, whereas there is no lighting here. There is just lighting inside the building, and there is a spillage of light outside, which you see here, and then there is little bit of interference of light here, and it makes that building look little bit more attractive. Now here the selection of luminaire, the placement of luminaire, everything comes into play, whereas it brings this to life. And I'm just going to share this last image, which I'm kind of quite proud of. This project got we completed this project last year. And in the landscape we worked on lighting concept, whereas we have not kind of shown luminaire except one area where Bobby Bhai did not agree, and kind of I also didn't agree, but we had to go and put those spike lights in the landscape. Apart from that, everything else is in ground. Everything has, the light source is not visible, as you can see from here, and it has come out really good. But the idea is, try and hide the light fixtures if you can. Try and lit the only parts of landscape, not the whole landscape, where you think that architecturally they are strong elements. And like driveways, you cannot compromise on the driveways. So you have to look onto the driveways here, which are critical parts of the landscape. Apart from that, you don't have to lit everything to kind of create an ambience or an atmosphere. And that's what kind of, I feel that this creates a good atmosphere. The client and I also love going to this project, which is quite good. And that's it, I guess. Any questions, anything, Bobby Bhai? I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions for me. Thank you.
Firstly, please accept our apologies for the glitches which happened in the presentation. Not your presentation, the glitches of the working of the presentation. Couple of quick questions. One is, of course, one person is here for about 25 years, and you said you have started 2012. Again, the same question which comes in: how do you see the market in the last 6 years now?
Since I started, the journey has been really very interesting. I am still learning, and I don't think I'll ever stop learning, because this what we do is kind of a learning experience for us every day. But in 2012, when I started, I was kind of not educating the clients, but I was somebody who was kind of new in the market, and people, it was kind of a new thing. Whereas, what is lighting designer? What do these lighting designers do? So I was kind of a fancy thing. People never thought that there is something called a profession called lighting designers. And it has taken me about 6 years now, whereas 80% of the people who I meet or I have a meeting with for the first time, they understand what I do, and we start talking about the project. Previously, 80% of my time went into explaining what I do and 20% about the commercials. So this is much more better now.
Oh,
I think,
perfect.
yeah.
Have you done something abroad by any chance?
Lighting Design Institute of Prague. That's where I went. There was a small stint with SEPT which I did, in which I went to Lighting Design Institute of Prague. And they teach lighting design also. So anybody who's kind of looking into profession of being a lighting designer, there are few institutes, but Lighting Design Institute of Prague is also one of them, and they are quite good. And I did a small stint with them.
Sure. You said you do a lot of renderings and all this technical drawing. So I presume Dialux is one of them as a software which people use. Do you use that, or is there any other software which your office works with in specific which you think we should be exploring?
Dialux is one of the commonly used software like those 2D softwares which a lot of architects also use, and we also use AutoCAD. We've started using a new software. We invested into a new software last year, but we've installed this year, and we are training our staff and myself too, a software called Python. It's a German-based software which also helps us in lighting rendering, but it also helps us in understanding architectural drawings too. So it's kind of a Revit, but it is much more better interactive software which I thought, and we've invested into it. So it's good software, yeah.
But this software is actually designed as a professional software or by
It is.
lighting companies?
No, it is designed as a professional architectural and lighting software.
So then how do you plug in the softwares or the light fittings of each and every brand into it?
Lot of international brand now and local brands which are made in India, they provide IES files, which are specific files for specific luminaires. When we kind of do a lux calculation or lighting calculation, we use those IES files to go into the software, and those plugins are much more easier to for us to kind of plug into the drawings and find the results. So all these softwares which I'm talking about, Python or Revit, IES can be easily installed into those software, I mean brought into the software, and then we can find the desired results.
One last question. You started your discussion or lecture saying that you got a call from one of your clients after 1.5 years saying this light is not working. How do you deal with that?
It's a tricky question, but when you get a phone call like this, and when the client happens to be your friend too, the phone call happened at 9:30 at night, because obviously they realize the light is not working at 9:30 because when they are out for a walk in their landscape, and they find out, oh, bhaiya ye light nahi chal rahi hai. Then he picks up a call and he calls me. The only thing we can do is we can get their electrician or contractors to go and look at the light, or a lighting vendor to kind of, we request the lighting vendors after 1.5 years, because request is the only thing we can do after 1.5 years of supplying a product. So they go on site, they find out what is the problem, and majority of the time installation is the problem, which Vikas is taken care of. Installation is the major problem on site, and that's why the fixtures fail on site, according to my experience.
And what happens if the client is not a friend?
If the client is not a friend, then you still send a vendor on site. Sometimes, believe me sir, I have paid sometimes money from my pocket to make sure the site is working fine, but because we are in love with the project, that's what we do. But if the client is not a friend, we still get help from the vendors to go and visit the site if they need to find out the problem and address the problem, because that client, if he is not friend, but he is a future client too. So I'm taking commercial sense into my mind too.
Yeah, also because you initially said that the third question which I could come at saying what happens if you don't love the project, but you are actually given the brief saying that you love all your projects, so now I'm not going to take you there. Thank you so much, Pranav. I would request all of you all, both of you all, to please come and share the stage for the questions for the audience.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask for landscape especially, when should you start the lighting? Normally you do the wiring and all that, you do it before the site is ready, right? But after the planting, when should actually the lighting be done?
Shall I go? Is it for me? Okay. I'm often asked a question, what is the right time to design or go for lighting design? To think about lighting. And that's when my answer is when you start planning your house or your landscape, the day when you start planning. Not when the plan is submitted to the client. When we, as a lighting designer, we work alongside the landscape architect from day one. That's when we can it is better for the project. Let's put it like that. When we know where the light points are and where we know where the trees are, it becomes much more easier for us to kind of plan. And installation module also is very, very, very important that the installation module is in place before the landscape is in place.
But the thing is, the trees are not going to grow so fast. However big the trees you get, like that effect is not going to happen for maybe another 5 years or 7 years, for whatever. So then what do? Because right now the fixture that you put is not going to be able to suffice after 5 years, or what you are going to put after 5 years is not going to be right for right now.
I think there has to be a two-layer planning in lighting, whereas we work onto 2 layers instead of working on just one plan. I cannot work on a higher intensity of lighting thinking that this is a banyan tree and it's going to get bigger after 5 years. What about now? So that's where we come. That's where my presentation also spoke about foreground, midground, and background. So one day, whatever is foreground for me, it is going to create a different space. So when we play with 2 layers of lighting, I'm sure it will take care of the trees which are growing up. The luminaire selection, I guess Vikas will talk about it more. He's got more experience in terms of a lot of landscape architects we work with. We come across a question: what happens in after 3 years? What about luminaires after 4 years, 5 years? But unfortunately, I don't have a question. I don't know how tall the tree is going to grow. I know the maximum height, but it also depends on the clients and the architects how tall he or she wants to keep the tree to.
And how it is going to spread also you don't know.
Yeah, so there are some things which are natural and let's keep it like that.
Okay, and what about the interference of light from other places? Like Atida was there and then suddenly AMA has come up, something like that. Then what about something like that?
Vikas, do you want to take this or?
I would only like to go back to your second question. See, in my experience is that when you do a design lighting for landscape, the beauty is that there is a lot of dynamics to it. The reason being that there is a plant material which is live, which keeps changing colors probably season to season, and secondly it may grow also time to time. Now there has to be a flexibility when you do the network part. So that is, in my opinion, is the first important deal. This is, you have to deal with it with the network part, so that even if tomorrow the plant material grows after 5 years, there is a possibility to add on any luminaire within that same network, because you can't dig the lawn or dig the thing time to time. Second part is that you can always use fixtures in, like, depending on today's scenario, the fixtures selection has to be for the next 5 years at least. However, if the your landscape is very scanty as of now, you can have less number of luminaires and with the possibility to add on tomorrow. Second part is, because it, landscape also changes colors over a period of time, in the entire season. So, light temperature is very, very critical here. So, in my understanding, sometimes we use the same color temperature all the time, may not be a good solution for all the landscape. So, yeah, but yes, you have to plan your network in advance. That's what I've experienced over a period of time, to take care of your landscape in future.
So maybe that's what you said. So summer and winter also, should it change? Because summer is very hot, especially in Ahmedabad, and winter is pretty cool.
No, I mean, I would say that imagine that there is some plant material which has got a sort of a certain color, you know, and they would blossom in certain part of the time. I mean, so naturally at that point of time you have to keep in mind the intensity and the color temperature of the lamp, because using one color temperature on every tree may not be a very good idea eventually, because the color of the tree doesn't look very natural when you use same color all the time. So I mean, there are different colors, when the green or the purple shades of purple, or and when the shade changes, probably color temperature has got a big role to play here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Vikas, sir. In one of the slides in your PPT, you have mentioned that LED lights are insensitive to vibrations. So with that, like as a designer, are there things that we have to consider that in landscape, there are places that there are in-ground installations which is near the road or something, things that we have to consider with that?
No. Actually, LEDs are, they are insensitive to vibrations, especially when you have placing, for example, if I'm understanding your question right, and you say that you have an in-ground installation to be done, and imagine that there's a walkover or a drive-over situation, the installation method is very, very different. Fixture could be good enough to, take the load, but when a car which is passing at a speed of 30 and crossing over a luminaire, and the same car passing in the speed of 50, there's a huge difference in the impact. So ideally, when you talk about walkovers and driveovers, the installation, the manner in which the installation is done is very, very critical there. But yes, LED has got nothing to do with LED, no problems at all. The entire engineering and entire construction is such that it is all those parameters are taken care of.
Sir, when we are lighting, suppose we are lighting a play field which is about 50 meters in expanse. So what kind of lighting do we use? So if it's a public park, is it wise to use a floodlight? Will there be a repercussion of glare, or so the pole light would not be sufficient? To use a floodlight, there will be children playing, and it's a very informal park. To avoid that glare, so what would be a lighting solution to it?
I would like to, I see your question in two parts. The second part probably he'll answer it better, but if I have to answer it, number one, see, when you have a pole of a certain height and luminaire installed on a pole on a certain height, and it is projecting towards a field, it is not, you can still control the glare. Now that's the engineering part of the lighting. It's not that, the moment you have a pole installed at a top height, which means that it will have a light pollution. It's not the case. You actually, that's the engineering calculation which tells you and defines how you are able to control it. So one is by choosing the right type of luminaire. When you say right type of luminaire, means that it has got a specified beam angle, it has got a degree in which the light travels. Then you talk about the intensity, which means that what is the output of that particular luminaire. That means eventually what is it is going to deliver towards the floor space, and so many other parameters. Eventually, if it is a formal playing ground like a football ground or any playgrounds, you can install your luminaire from a height and you can still control it. When you say floodlight, so floodlight is a very, very big term. In a floodlight, you get huge varieties of products, but you surely get products which are very, very easily available, which has got very good amount of glare control and no light pollution also. And even your second question, that how do you design that particular informal space, what should be the design criteria? Probably, he's a lighting designer, maybe he can answer it better.
Design criteria, I would ask, if you were a client, what is the purpose of this space? What is this space going to be used for? And that's how we start planning about the lighting of the space. Now, when he was talking about the spillage, I would kind of give you a small example. You must have kind of seen a lot of cricket grounds from outside. And you must have seen or driven past or kind of walked past a cricket ground and see no light spillage whatsoever. You must have kind of sat in a cricket ground, cricket stadium and watched a cricket match, but not felt a kind of a glare which kind of makes you blind, except you look at the fixtures on the top. The reason being is because they are planned in such a way that the light is supposed to hit just the floor, just the pitch, and that's how every single luminary is placed on a pole. Now, I just met a famous cricketer about 6 weeks back, and that's when I realized that on a cricket field, because there are live cameras and they record HD and then transmit, they need 1500 lux on the pitch. Whereas we don't need more than 300 lux to see a cricket ball or 500 lux to see a cricket ball. So, when we know what we are designing for, when we know the purpose of the space, when you say it is just a generic ground and just kids are going to play on the ground, we would kind of control the fixture and place the fixture in about 20-meter height and direct them onto the field, and that's it. That's about it. But then as soon as your purpose changes, the lighting fixtures also changes, the height also changes, everything else changes, and the budget also changes too. Because more specific fixtures require a little bit more budget.
Sir, you talked about materials and how different lights react on that. And so with your experience, how do you do that? Like, do you experiment on every material, or you use software to figure out how it will reflect? Or
Softwares are very helpful, but reliability on software is also important. Nowadays we will have to rely on. But when a new material comes into play, whereas we are not sure about that material, because lot of softwares, they give you material palettes in the software. It's part of the package in which say for an example, there is a cotton steel facade or a planter in a landscape which is a cotton steel. Then I will get that material palette in one of my libraries, one of my software libraries. But if there is some material which I have not heard of, or I have not seen, or the software does not recognize, that material we have to test on site. So more information we have to get from the material vendor or the architects or whoever is bringing the material into the landscape or any space.
I have a question for Mr. Jain. Let's say if there's a very large scale project, so do you get projects where you are commissioned to be the landscape architect, walks up and says that I want you to do the entire project in toto? So do you work with an in-house, do you have an in-house landscape architect who helps you understand the vocabulary of a landscape architect, or do you work in tandem with someone or some softwares which you can develop with? How does it work at your factory or your place of work?
In our factory, we have a design team of 25 design engineers who work continuously with architects of the client and otherwise landscape consultants, and it happens in almost every project. Like we did a project with ESL, which was in Varanasi. We did the lighting for the entire city. So we had to work with the engineers at ESL that this is the kind of lighting that they expect at a certain street or a certain road, depending on how important the road is, or it's a narrow or a main road or anything else. So accordingly, we give them the designs that this is what our recommendation says, and their architect work with us. And similarly, it works in private projects where they are landscape consultants. They tell us that these are the areas that they want highlighted in a certain way, and based on the recommendation of the lighting consultants, we suggest them the products and we give them the drawings.
So do you have at that point of time lighting consultants within your organization, or then it's like the landscape architects and the lighting consultants, both of them, whatever they decide is what is, then you give us options?
As such, we don't have lighting consultants, but since we are manufacturing lights, we can suggest landscape consultants that these are the lights in our experience which can work better at the site.
Okay. And how do you look at post-delivery handover? Meaning, very often, like everyone was saying, installation is a problem, and of course you are the supplier and he is recommending and I am vouching for it, and everything is happening like a chain reaction.
Correct.
So obviously if something goes wrong, then he calls you up
Correct.
and then you say that it's badly installed.
Correct.
So then the client looks up to all four of us and says we are surrounded by four people who don't have an answer.
Okay.
So where does that discussion then go on further?
So it happens in almost every project, and it's a very practical problem that we all are facing as of now. So what we started doing was, initially we used to supply the lights with installation guidelines to the purchase department. Then we realized that it is not getting transmitted to the people at site. Then we started going to the site in charges, that this is how the fixture is going to be installed. But he was not communicating it to the person who was actually installing the lights. Then we started giving the installation guidelines inside the boxes so that the electrician can see it. But when we went to the site, we saw that he is not seeing any paper. He doesn't have time to sit and read all those things. He'll just throw that paper and start installing the lights in the way he does. So next step was to start educating those people. So we are going to that extent to make sure that the lights are getting installed correctly. Vikasji correctly mentioned that in case of in-grounds, the installation has to be in a very particular way, or else it's an expensive fixture and it will get spoiled in some time. So we are trying to educate client as much as possible, and with time it is changing. But yeah, coming back to the question, how we give after sales support, we mostly rely on the consultants and the site people who are installing it to do it the right way. Else we try and find out if it is a manufacturing error or an error at the site, and then we handle it accordingly.
So do you think, I'll take this question slightly forward, and do you think that as key persons in the manufacturing unit, would you be willing to take on workshops which actually tell, because it's like a very simple thing, no? Forget the electrical part. Today we get a handset of a new mobile. First we put is the charger and put it and plug it and play it. I don't think I've ever opened the card and seen what is there inside.
Exactly.
Okay, and I'm sure that's all of us does the same thing. So do you think that it requires, because you see what is happening, I'm coming from a fact that this is actually a chain reaction. And while we can keep all talking about it and saying that nobody reads it at site and nobody does it at site, at some point of time there's also the onus from all of us to say that, well, nobody's taken it at a larger picture level to say that this is the way a workshop needs to get conducted, to actually do it across. And companies like you, which are very, very large firms, can actually take that responsibility where you call in the people, you call in the technicians, you call in the lighting consultants, maybe architects, and put together an agenda saying that this is the manner in which it needs to be done. Because what that will do is that will set a benchmark. And it's just a suggestion, but I think it's something which people like you or similar companies across India should actually vouch for, because otherwise, do you see an end to this?
It's actually a very valid question, and we have recently started doing it. In fact, this year and last year also, we invited all our dealers, distributors and channel partners, and instead of having the regular dealers meet in which everybody parties every day, we made them sit at the factory, that this is how the luminaire is made, this is how it is supposed to be installed, so that they can in return reciprocate it to the people at site. Because a company person cannot be everywhere, but these channel partners, distributors and dealers are there. So we're trying to make sure that it transmits through them. We have started it in 1 or 2 years, and now the next phase, we're planning on calling all the architects, consultants, and we're also working on a handbook as of now that we can give to all the landscape consultants to just a basic outline that this is on a broad level how it should be done.
Yeah, very good. Okay, I think, is there any other questions? No? I would like to thank all three of you all. Thank you for coming here and giving us your valuable knowledge. Thank you, and we hope to see you again soon here when we have another lecture series of lighting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.